Welcome to I Could Talk to You All Day. I'm Lauren Lefkowitz, recovering workaholic, perfectionist, and people pleaser.
And I'm John Spears, emerging from playing small, getting caught up in the inertia of life, and always being on.
I Could Talk to You All Day is a show for executives and emerging leaders. This is not just another leadership podcast. We're here to talk about what it means to be a leader while also being human.
So join us for raw, vulnerable, and probably pretty funny conversations about shifting from surviving at work and home to thriving in the life you've always wanted. Let's get the conversation started. Hey, Lauren Lefkowitz, how are you doing today?
John Spears, I am great. Things are
Tell me more about being great.
I woke up this week believing in myself. I don't have all the weeks like that, but I'm in a can-do kind of place. And I like that. I'm even wearing a shirt today that says believe in yourself because I want other people to follow me and believe in themselves.
You are wearing a shirt that says that, and it's like super colorful lettering. And I like looking at it.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm deciding to believe in myself and do the things anyway. I'm going to be a member of the How Hard Can It Be Club for a while.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me a little bit more about how you made the shift. We talk on a regular basis. There's definitely a different energy going on with you. What happened?
Yeah. Well, first I got real mad.
I know that feeling.
I signed up to work with my business coach again, and she's awesome. And
she is awesome.
Helped me. Love her. Yeah, we do love her. She helped me build my business the first time around. And now I'm at a point where I'm leveling some things up. I'm stuck in some areas, and I was really annoyed with myself that I needed her again. And so I hopped on a call with her and I said, look, I'm going to tell you all the reasons I'm angry. I should be more successful because you taught me how to be successful. So I feel like I'm failing you. You launched me. I should just be off the ground and doing all the things. And there are things I'm not doing that I know I would be doing. I should be able to do this by myself because I'm a freaking CEO. I'm the leader of my own company and I shouldn't need other people to do this. And so it makes me feel like I'm a failure as a CEO and a leader. And she said, isn't this what you coach your clients who are CEOs and VPs and directors on? And I said, send me the paperwork.
And in that voice, in that way.
Yeah. And then we both started laughing. And I said, thank you. That's the reminder I needed that we are not meant to exist in isolation. And I have people all around me. I have built community. You and I are in a little community of coaches who are collaborating together.
That sounded kind of we're in a compound or
right.
We're in this little community that we built together off in the woods somewhere.
You do the gardening, I do the hunting. And no, but we have this little online group of ontological and coactive coaches who meet together. I have you have me. I'm in an entrepreneur, first generation entrepreneurs group. I've got community all around me. And so I don't feel like I'm in isolation. And then I sit down to do my work and I need an advisor. I need a business advisor. And so I needed a reminder of that because my whole history was trying to do everything by myself. I don't do that anymore. Now I receive help and I have to remember to ask for it. And now that I do, and now that I'm back into it, and in fact, I have a call with my coach this afternoon, I'm like, okay, here's the list of 36 things I want to do that I don't know how to do. And this time around in working with her, I said, last time we both let me get away with backing away from some things out of fear. This time around, I want us to both hold me accountable for the fear stuff is the hurdles. Let's get over the hurdles. If it's misaligned, let's not do it.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's fear, let's break it down into smaller steps. What's one thing at a time that I can do to get there instead of just backing away from the things that feel like scary and bigger than I feel like I am right now. And so I feel like I'm in a really good place with all of that.
That's awesome. I have so many things and responses and reactions to what you just said. I'll save a lot of them for another conversation because there's just like, it's chock full of, I think, kind of things I want to talk to you about and talk to our folks about. But one of the things that I just think we're both shifting is around resistance.
Mm-hmm.
I'm reading this really interesting book called The War of Art. And the whole premise, it's this really like small little book. I'm listening to it on Audible and I just ordered it because I really want to get more, but it's all about resistance and how resistance is the thing that keeps us from living the life we want to live. It keeps us from being creative. It keeps us from sort of showing up. And I think when I'm hearing, you're not saying this, but like, I think in both of our lives, there's just so much less resistance to like, what is happening, what is not happening. There's a lot more kindness to ourselves and sort of, even your example around using Katie again, your a business coach I've used her in the past. And the kindness that it just sort of being able to say, I need help and I need support. And there is nothing wrong with that. I know that is a huge blockage for certain people to like find coaching or find support or get the support they need in their lives or their marriages, their relationships at work. And once we can kind of move past that resistance, it's almost like the same thing. Once we move past our comfort zone, that's when like aliveness happens and thriving and sort of like really living the kinds of lives and being the kinds of people we want to be. That's what happens. And I just kind of like sense that in both of us today. Like there's just, lots of stuff is happening in my life, lots of like challenging things and transitions and changes. And it hasn't necessarily gotten any easier, but I think the resistance to that, the resistance to unknowing, to the not being in control, to having it need to be figured out, the kind of thinking around, I need to like be perfect before I can like do something, launch something. All of that resistance is sort of fading away. And I think we should totally explore that in another episode or call, but it's just super interesting that we've been on a very similar journey. It's looked very different, but we're like in this new place and maybe it's like spring and aliveness and like stuff is shifting or changing in the ecosystem, in the realm or whatever we're in.
Well, and you said it's practice, right? It's not perfection. It's recognizing the resistance and then deciding what to do with it instead of just like being in the resistance and staying there. So what I hear in both of us, as you and I are progressing in whatever ways we're progressing, is we catch it faster. We catch the resistance faster. And it's because we've been willing to practice. It's because we've been willing to say like, no, I don't want to, I'm afraid to, I don't want to be here. And then we allow ourselves to sit in it and notice it. And then you can decide from there.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, all of this is, I could talk to you all day about this,
but we've got a show to do.
But we've got a show to do. We got a agenda to go over. And this topic that we're talking about today is something I'm both really, really excited about talking about, but is also something that is really challenging for me, for lots of other people, lots of other leaders. And that is really, it's having difficult conversations at work, having difficult conversations in our relationships, in our families, with our friends. Just this idea of having a difficult conversation. Even now, as I'm saying it, like I can kind of feel like my body getting a little warm, my face is getting a little red. Cause I'm like, the relationship that we have with that can be really challenging.
Yes. And as executives and as people leaders, it's like so much easier to help other people formulate and execute on how they're going to have difficult conversations than it is to have our own difficult conversations.
Totally.
Right? Like I remember a lot of times in my career, I worked in HR for 20 years. Like I had all kinds of difficult conversations. If they were about the relationship between two employees, if they were about somebody not performing, if they were about a harassment issue, super easy for me to get involved in. If they were about what I needed, no, I can't do that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So
Totally.
that was a real practice for me to build like a new level of resilience and fortitude. Is that the right word? In like being able to not only recognize that I needed to have a difficult conversation that I was in the center of, but also to then be willing to.
Yeah, totally. Why do you think it's so hard for leaders to have difficult conversations?
I think there are a couple of reasons. And sort of in a fork, right? Like the difficult conversations that involve ourselves, if it's a relationship conversation or a talking to your boss or your board about what you need kind of conversation, you don't want to come across, I say you, like I'm excluded from this. I'm just going to teach you things. We don't want to come across as needy. We don't want to come across as detracting from the business of the business. We don't want to come across as weak. When it goes the other fork, where we're handling an employee situation or we're handling a group or team situation or an interpersonal situation, that's going to be difficult. I think we don't want to offend people. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to bring something to light and make it even worse. We don't want people to not like us. Mm-hmm. Right? Unless you're like a sociopath, we have an inherent need to be liked. And I think, in my experience, both personally and in coaching other people on how to have these conversations, there is always, no matter what the other hesitations are, there's always a thread of we want to be liked. Mm-hmm. What about you? What do you think?
I think when I think about why I don't like to have some of these conversations, it's almost always rooted in some sort of fear. To your point, it's fear of not being liked, fear of hurting someone's feelings, fear of being vulnerable with someone and telling someone else what I need or what I want from them, giving feedback, not knowing how the conversation is going to go. I mean, I think it's really easy sometimes. It's easy to have easy conversations, right? Hard things are hard, and they're hard for a reason. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't tackle them and go all in on them. But it's, they're called difficult conversations for a reason. And we don't want to live in that kind of experience of the anticipation of a difficult conversation, of potentially hurting someone's feelings, of challenging someone, of the unknown around that exists. And so I think there's almost always some sort of fear when I'm resisting a conversation that I know could be challenging. It's always rooted in fear, and it requires me to do a few things, which we'll talk about later on how to have these, but to be comfortable in that discomfort and to have courage and to say, even if I'm, having a challenging time with this, or this is hard for me, I'm going to do it anyway, because I know the payoff of having those. And I think that leads us into a question of like, why it's important for us to have those difficult conversations, not only as leaders, but as humans. I mean, it's so important if we want to create the kind of culture, the kind of environment, the kind of relationships that we want. Difficult conversations are inevitable, and it's almost the cost of anything meaningful. Right? Yeah. Anything that I have that's meaningful in my life is forged with some sort of getting in alignment, a difficult conversation, quote, something being hard.
Mhm.
And so if we want to have meaning and if we want to experience meaning in all areas of our lives, I think we need to be prepared to have difficult conversations.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think that sometimes I think of saying something and then I imagine our listeners going like, "Oh, Lauren, how dare you?" Right? So this is what I'm going
Is
to
that a
say,
moment?
and
Is this
that's
one of
this
those?
moment
Okay.
right now. That's what's going to happen. Is that people are going to say like, "How dare I'm turning this podcast off? I'm done. I could not talk to you all day."
Oh, that would be sad.
Oh no, you could talk to
But
us.
it's okay because we
Yeah,
really want only people who are aligned with this to be listening and to that this resonates with. So it's
yeah.
okay if people turn it off.
We are liars. That's the unpopular thing. Thank you. Thank you for the reaction.
Oh my, what do you mean by
Lauren,
that?
what do you mean you're lie? I'm so honest. I'm always
I
honest.
never lie.
Thank you for the reaction. I appreciate it. Not having difficult conversations is creating lies.
Mm,
And it is not intentional. It's not like we're trying to be deceitful. We're actually, the try under it is to try to be nice. And we don't want to hurt people's feelings. We don't want to get in trouble. We don't want people to not like us, right? Like all the things you and I both just said. So we lie by not confronting the hard things, by not saying to our boss, "Hey, I know I'm a vice president, but do you know that I'm working 75 hours a week? How can we work together to take stuff off my plate?" By not saying that, by sitting in a one-on-one with your CEO, if you're vice president, with your board, if you're the CEO, and not saying, "I need a bigger staff," or "I need fewer projects," or "we have too many priorities to get through this year." Instead of having that difficult conversation, we're lying and we're saying, "Yeah, everything's going great." And then we're crying on our way home. Or we're yelling at kids because, not like just random kids, our own kids. I don't have kids, so I say yelling at kids, like I might just pick a kid off the street. But
That's what I
we're yelling.
imagine. I actually imagine you next to a school bus that had just stopped and let all these kids off, and the bus went off, and as you drove by, you like were yelling like curse words at these kids.
Right.
Just, you
Yeah.
know.
Get off my lawn. I live in a high-rise apartment building. I don't have a lawn. But we're lying. And so, and if we have an employee who reports to us who's underperforming, or who is not communicating well with their own teams or with their own colleagues, we're lying. We're doing it because we think it's going to make them feel better, but it's a disservice to them.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, hey, employee, things aren't going well. Let's talk about why. Let's not sandwich it into a compliment sandwich. Hey, you're so amazing. Here's this terrible thing, but you're really doing great, right? That's the compliment sandwich. We don't do that anymore. That's not real. If we're going to have these real conversations and we're going to have the difficult discussions about what isn't going well, what needs to change, then we're telling the truth. Then we're being authentic. We're being courageous. We're being kind.
Yeah.
If we're trying to dance around things and be nice and, hey, did you ever think about this kind of thing? Oh, no. Oh, okay. And we just back off. We are lying. And then we carry that lie around and it sucks energy out of us.
Yeah.
So we can't keep doing that. If we want to be effective leaders and effective humans and effective in our personal relationships, we have to be telling the truth.
You know, I had the initial experience of being like a little like, what the F are you talking about? I am not a liar. And then when you talked about us not having difficult conversations and putting stuff out there, it just kind of, I had a whole body experience where it was sort of like tingly from like my neck down to my toes. And it really resonated that when I'm not having difficult conversations, and I'm not saying proactively going out and having conversations just to have difficult conversations, but having hard conversations for the sake of deepening relationship, for having more impact, for ensuring that there's alignment with two people or an organization or a team, you know, that I'm actually being really disingenuous to myself and what I'm called to do or who I am. And that's like a real kind of punch in the gut and a real, I think, motivator for me to continue to have difficult conversations. And one of the things that you also said that I really resonated with as I love this book. It's called oh my God, I just forgot it. Radical Candor. And Radical Candor talks a lot about the distinction between being nice and being kind. And I have been a part of a lot of really nice teams and organizations where there has been a real lack of difficult conversations, and the effectiveness and impact of teams that have difficult conversations and are kind, and the impact that nice teams have that kind of skirt really hard conversations is night and day. Those teams and those relationships and those organizations that are fostering having difficult conversations are more productive, more effective, having more impact, higher morale. It's just, I think in my experience, all around better than those experiences I've had where people were just sort of walking on eggshells and afraid to say what they really thought or what they believed was going to be in the best interest of the business.
Yeah. As you're saying that, and as you're talking about sort of this idea of teams that have these difficult conversations, my mindset sort of shifted to these are less so difficult conversations and more so brave conversations, right? It's that courage piece. It feels difficult until you take that one courage step, and then it's brave and it's courageous. And it's, like you said, it's kind. It's the difference between just sort of glossing over all the niceties and actually like being deeply kind and standing up for yourself, for your teams, for your people, for your relationships in a way that really will improve everybody's experience in the long run. They may not feel great in the moment, which is what makes us think before we take that step that they're going to be difficult. And if you've had the experience in the past of having what felt like a difficult conversation with someone not go well, and you never cleaned that up, you never came back to it and had another conversation, then your bravery starts to dwindle. But if you can find that bravery and put on your big person pants and right, put on your grown-up pants and practice it, right? Like, and we'll talk in a couple of minutes, I think, about how, right? But being willing to get brave about confronting the harder things builds like a bravery muscle for you. So it becomes less difficult and more courageous.
I totally think we need to go back and rebrand this episode and the whole like difficult conversation thing to courageous conversations. We need to find like a find and replace on our audio and just change it to like, it'll be like, those recordings where it's like, hi, your gate is now number 4, and try to like do that whole thing with this, because that framing is so, I even feel it and I'm experiencing it differently, thinking about these not as difficult conversations, but as courageous conversations where we have an opportunity to be brave. And frankly, the person that we're talking to also has an opportunity to be brave and to know that they can handle the conversation and navigate it from a receiving end as well. So I love this idea of thinking about these conversations, not as difficult, but as an opportunity for us to be brave that then really builds this muscle in our lives. Before we dive into sort of like how-tos, which I think is really, really important for this conversation, because I think there's so much, I think, to share around this, and I'd love to hear your experience. The one thing that I've been thinking a lot about before we like dive into the how of anything is, what am I committed to? And I like to ask myself that question before I ask the how question, because then it really helps me to know my why behind what I'm doing or what I'm committing to do, or sort of just the reasoning behind what I'm trying to figure out. And I think, we've said it, the why here really is to have deeper connection with people, to give people feedback, to correct mistakes that are happening that aren't in alignment with our own boundaries, our own kind of how we want things to go, or a company's way of doing things, or policies and procedures, or even like efficacy, or effectiveness in a role, which ultimately leads to much more positive outcomes than just sort of letting things linger, festering without really addressing them. And so for me, the why, or sort of what I'm committed to in having these conversations, is to the points we talked about: showing up authentically, giving feedback, using these relationships, or using these conversations to deepen relationship, or to ensure that there's alignment in any number of ways.
I always think of, when I think about what I'm committed to, I think about how I'm committed to, right? You and I, in our coach certification training, we went through coursework that was based in ontology, which is the study of being, which was a very challenging concept for me as a doer to understand.
Right.
In my being, my default ways of being, which are the sort of automatic protective ways of being, involve me trying to be perfect, trying to please people, and being immediately willing to compromise my own happiness. And so what I am committed to in this phase of my life is noticing those, being called out on those, being in a place where I try to identify, is this coming from like my higher self, my essence, the who I am when I'm not interrupted by my survival mechanisms? Or is this being driven by my drive to perfectionism and pleasing and giving up what I want in favor of what someone else might benefit from more, which I guess is like another way of saying pleasing. But I am committed to not living a life where I come second, which can sound really selfish, right? But it also makes me better for other people. And in being selfish or self-serving or self-facing, or whatever term we want to use that doesn't make us feel bad, right, is in putting myself first. It means I have to have these conversations. I have to have brave conversations. I had a conversation with someone yesterday about a potential partnership. And in that conversation, there was this talk of, if I partnered with her, this sort of tiered thing where I would be reporting into her line of the partnership. And I said to her, after a lot of discussion, and I really like her, I said to her, if we do this, it has to be right for both of us. And also, I spent a lot of years being second in command. It's not for me anymore. I wouldn't have said that a couple of years ago. And I said, it's not for me anymore. And it's okay if us being on a level playing field in this venture isn't for you. Like, this may not be the partnership for us. Totally cool. It's your business, right? That I would be joining. But I'm not a second in command anymore. I've built my own little empire and it's growing. And I'm going to keep building different pieces of my empire. This could be part of it, but it also could not be part of it. And that was a hard conversation. My heart was pounding a little bit. She totally agreed with me. She was like, let's keep talking about this. Let's keep this conversation going. I could have just said like, okay, I mean, it's still a good opportunity for me. Yeah, I mean, I'll be second tier, but I could have done all this justifying, but it wouldn't have made me happy. If we do partner, it will be fruitful and beneficial and exciting and awesome for both of us. And if we don't, it will be for the right reasons. So having those brave conversations for me is, I'm so committed to that because I want to live a life that's full of joy, That's not lacking. That's not second tier. And if I'm going to commit to that, then I have to commit to having brave conversations.
So that's a really great segue into how do you have a brave conversation? We've got a few minutes left. We'd love to hear a few points of how do you go into conversations that you need to kind of muster some courage and some bravery around.
Yeah. Well, I say, first of all, be willing to step away. Be willing to say, I'm not ready to have this conversation yet. I really want to think about this before we dive into this. Can we regroup in, this amount of time? And not like again later, like set a time so that you're really coming back to it. 2 is when you are ready to have the conversation, when you are in the conversation, or if you can't delay the conversation, say all of the things. You can be kind and clear at the same time. Mm-hmm. But the kindness is in making sure that other people know your view, your needs, the needs of the business, the needs in the relationship, whatever it is. Clarity is so key. And then I would say the third thing is follow up. Don't leave a difficult or brave or courageous conversation and wipe your hands of it and say like, oh, that was hard, but now I'm done. Part of maintaining the relationship and continuing to build it is being willing to come back to the conversation. Hey, have you reflected on the conversation? And then the last thing I would say, which we always say, is get support. You are not in isolation. You are not an island. There is somebody who can help you, whether it's your coach, whether it's your own manager, whether it's a mentor. Somebody can help you practice these conversations before you have them. How about you?
I have a 5-step process
around
courageous conversations.
I love it.
I think one is I think for me, as we talk about ontology and the sort of how we be in the world, is really to observe and reflect on our relationship with conflict, our relationship with difficult conversations, and really explore that so we get really clear on what's behind this discomfort. Like why are there things in the past that are causing this? What are the fears, et cetera? And once we're really clear on that, it really helps us give us a game plan for how we want to tackle it and address it. The second is, and I think this is true with anything in life, especially these days with me, is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. Getting comfortable with the discomfort. And just because something is uncomfortable in our body, just because we have a physical reaction or an experience, doesn't mean it's not the right thing for us to do or we shouldn't be doing it. And oftentimes we have those triggers or those physical responses, fight, flight, freeze, fawn, faint, all the things. And they're really kind of take us away from wanting to do the right thing because we're having this, can be a really physically intense experience that some of us have with resistance around some of these things. The third is practice. I think my advice for anything is practice. It's just like, just practice. The more you do it, the more you're going to grow, the more you're going to learn, the more skilled you'll become at it. And so really being intentional and proactive about having some of these courageous conversations, super, super important. Number 4 is write it down. Having talking points going into a difficult conversation is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign of really wanting to be intentional around communicating what you want to communicate. And I don't know about you, but oftentimes when I'm having these courageous conversations, I can get scared in the moment and not say everything that there is to say, or speak or skirt around an issue, or not be super clear. And so I write down what I want to say when I'm having a difficult or a courageous conversation to keep me honest and to make sure that I'm delivering the points when I'm scared in the same way that I would deliver them if I was feeling super confident and I drafted them alone in a room. And the last is around having some sort of grounding practice. Before I go into any sort of challenging conversation, I always want to make sure I'm taking 5 minutes to do some breathing exercise, some meditation, maybe just sitting quietly in a room to make sure that I'm fully present in that conversation and I can kind of get my body in a place to be calm, even if I'm feeling super, super activated.
Amazing points.
I could talk to you all day long about this. There's so much more I want to talk about around this and some of the other things we talked about, but our time is up. We got to run. So thanks for joining us today.
We're so grateful you decided to be with us during this episode. Subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues, and join us next time for more Real Talk.